President-elect Trump's transition back to the White House with someone who recently withdrew his name for consideration to be the U.S. Attorney General, Republican Senator Eric Schmitt, and former Attorney General of Missouri, and now a senator from Missouri. Senator, thanks so much for joining. So you say you withdrew your name in part because you want to help move Trump's agenda in the Senate. Who do you think Trump should pick as Attorney General?
Well, that's entirely up to President Trump. I'm not going to get in front of him on that. He's going to have a bunch of great options, just like he has for these other cabinet positions, and he'll make a strong decision on that. And it's a very important role for me. You know, carrying forward the agenda here in the Senate. Just having been elected 2 years ago, I wanted to make sure I did that. But he's got a lot of great options, and I think it's important for him, given that mandate that he got last week from the American people, to actually carry that out, whether it's securing the border, having an economy that works for working families, being energy dominant again. I think it's going to be really important for him to get the right people in place.
So I hear you when it comes to the economy. I hear you when it comes to the border. What about this idea of retribution? What about this idea of using the Justice Department to go after his political enemies? Is that something that you think is part of the mandate?
Well, I think he talked about my retribution is going to be success, right? That's what this whole thing's going to be. That's really what he's talking about. I do think that the Justice Department has gone astray here. You've had the Justice Department targeting Catholics, going after parents who showed up to school board meetings under the auspices of the Patriot Act because they were concerned their kids were being forced to wear masks all day long. So getting the Department of Justice in a place where it's actually fighting violent crime again would be a big step forward, and I think that's what his focus is.
One of the possible picks for Attorney General is a gentleman named Mark Paletta. He had this message for current employees of the U.S. Justice Department. Take a listen.
Deporting millions of illegal aliens out of this country, securing the border, banning DEI, all that destructive stuff that the Biden administration let run wild, getting boys out of girls' sports. Those are all the things that the Department of Justice is going to work on, and those are the things that the Department of Justice employees, career employees, are going to support. And if they don't want to support it, they should leave.
Do you agree with that sentiment? I mean, that's thousands of employees.
Well, look, the President of the United States has an opportunity here, which he's given, and every administration gets the opportunity to put the right people in place, the people who are going to carry out their agenda. I will say, over a bunch of administrations now, the administrative state has gotten too big. It's not accountable to anybody, Jake. That's the problem. It's not what our founders envisioned. You're supposed to be able to elect people. You can send them back or send them home. But when you have bureaucrats who are thwarting the efforts of the administration, I don't think there's any place for that. I really don't. And so you can have robust debate. Everybody has their own roles, but I do think that it's time for President Trump, as he comes in and gets the right people in place, who are going to execute on his agenda.
Tomorrow, you and your colleagues in the Senate are going to vote to replace Senator Mitch McConnell with the vote for the next Senate Republican leader. It will be the majority leader. The nominees, or the candidates, I should say, rather, are John Thune and John Cornyn and Rick Scott. Who will get your vote?
Well, I'm going to listen to everybody. That's what I've been doing this whole time and having conversations. Even today, we have a candidate forum actually this evening over in the Capitol, and the vote will take place tomorrow. And for me, there's two criteria. I've been very clear to all the candidates who are running. Number one, I want to make sure we have an agenda that's reflective of that mandate that happened last week and that really speaks to the hopes and wishes of the American people. Sometimes these conversations, Jake, as you know, in Washington, can be very detached from what people are talking about back home, and I want to make sure we have an agenda that's reflective of that. And then also, there's some real internal reforms that need to be instituted. Senators need to be able to offer amendments on the Senate floor. This is kind of in the weeds, filling the tree, closing senators out of both parties. You have an opportunity when you can offer amendments on the floor of building unique coalitions, Republicans and Democrats who can come up with good ideas. The way Chuck Schumer's run the floor over the last 2 years, there's no room for that. It's kabuki theater. It's very scripted. I think we ought to open the place up and let senators, work with each other and get things done. So those are the two things for me that I'm talking to all the candidates about.
President-elect Trump wants the next Senate Majority Leader to agree to adjourn so he can make recess appointments for his nominees. This also gets in the weeds a little bit, but basically it's a way for him to essentially bypass Congress in a temporary way and just have his picks assume their posts without the normal advice and consent role of the Senate, vetting, hearings, and all the like. Are you in favor of that?
Well, there's two things I'd point to on that, Jake. First, The way Chuck Schumer has run the floor, we had an impeachment that came over. In the history of our country, there's never been an instance where we didn't actually have a trial. In almost 250 years, Chuck Schumer just dismissed it. So Chuck Schumer doesn't care very much about what the rules are. But secondly, it's a relatively new phenomenon that there haven't been recess appointments. It's really about the last 10 or 12 years. The Senate's been totally dysfunctional in that period of time with omnibus bills. So I think all options ought to be on the table. The president deserves to have his appointees on a temporary basis move through to implement an agenda.
How long would you be comfortable with in terms of temporary for a recess appointment? 2 months, 2 years? What do you think?
I'd like to see what we're talking about. I mean, I think that these are temporary appointments, again, to get moving. But I think he fully intends to present these cabinet positions and Senate confirmations, judges, for full Senate review. But I think we got to get rolling, and I think recess appointments are a way to have something on the table to allow us to do that.
The current filibuster rules basically allow the minority to have a say. You need 60 votes. You will have, I guess Republicans will have 53 votes, if my math is correct. I would imagine that Donald Trump will get impatient with that. I don't mean that pejoratively, but he's an impatient guy. He wants his agenda passed. Would you be in favor of getting rid of the filibuster?
Look, I think the best, for a lot of the arguments that came up in election season about him being so-called threat to democracy, which is ridiculous, he was president before. That didn't happen before. There's no real discussion about nuking the filibuster on the Republican side. I will tell you the Democrats have vowed to do it. Their candidates running to do it so they can pack the Supreme Court at D.C. As a state, federalize our elections, and grant amnesty to 50 million people. The Democrats have said they would do that if they ever had the power to go do it. There's no real discussion right now on the Republican side to do that.
All right, Senator Eric Schmitt from the great state of Missouri. Thanks so much. Good to see you, sir.
All right, Jake.